What if the U.S. started social distancing earlier? A new study from Columbia University says a difference of just 1 week could have saved thousands of lives. Joining me now, NBC News medical contributor Dr. Natalie Azar. And Dr. Azar, this research from Columbia says that 36,000 people could still be alive today if we had social distancing measures in place just a week earlier. That is such a dramatic difference. How did they reach that number?
Yeah, I know. And so here's what's important, Allison, always about these models. You know, it's a statistical model. It's always based on assumptions. And by the way, it also is based on ideal and hypothetical assumptions, which isn't always the reality. You know, in practice, there was a lot of general uncertainty at that time. There were economic concerns. There was logistics. But I think if you think about the timeline of what happened to us, we had our first case in the U.S. on January 20th. March 11th is when the World Health Organization first declared this a global pandemic. And by the beginning of April, we had greater than 1 million cases worldwide. What was missing in there? Why didn't we act sooner? Well, of course, I think we can all agree that probably the biggest failure of this administration and this country, in fact, would be the testing, that we just didn't have the testing and we didn't have the public health infrastructure to handle what ended up becoming this. And I think the messaging from these researchers is not so much, well, we can't go, turn back the clock and undo what we did, but rather, how do we take this information and implement it for the future? Meaning, as we start to relax social distancing and we start to relax those control measures, we have to keep a really, really close eye on that resurgence, which is always going to lag a couple of weeks. And we need to really, really forcefully re-implement the social distancing if we start to see cases rise. That's really all you can do with it at this point, is just to learn something and, and hopefully it modifies our behavior and policies moving forward.
All right, so I'm going to jump from one study to another. That one was about closing things down. Today, MIT has a study about opening things back up, showing the devastating cost if states fail to coordinate their economic reopenings. What is that study saying?
So this one was interesting, Allison, because if I said to you, do you think that a state's behaviors are influenced by states which are close to them geographically, you'd say, yeah, sure, that makes sense, right? That geographic proximity, of course, is going to have an effect. Well, what these researchers found out was that not only was geographic proximity an indicator for how states behave, but rather they used as a proxy social connections to see how states that are actually geographically distant are influenced by each other. And they did it in an interesting way. They basically looked at states' different policies regarding shelter in place, as well as business closures. And then they track that or match that with mobile device data, as well as social connectedness on Facebook. And they found that the contact patterns of people, not just in a given region and geographically, but the contact patterns of people in distant states influenced one another. So what that basically means is that, we've talked about this patchwork reopening and how different states have different policies and we need to be more universal. Well, realistically, you can't do that because different states have different needs. They have different degrees of viral transmission and everything like that. But what they're basically saying is don't overlook those other connections that go beyond just geographic proximity, but pay attention to how people are communicating, the Zoom contacts, the parties, the Zoom meetings, and things like that, because that's also factoring into how people behave in geographically distant states. Interesting stuff from a statistics point of view.
Yeah, very interesting. Dr. Azar, before you go, I'd love to talk to you about masks. We have seen some resistance to wearing masks this week. Based on these studies and based on your medical expertise here, how much of a difference would it have made if the CDC told Americans to wear masks right away? And how much of a difference do you think wearing masks can make going forward?
Yeah, honestly, Allison, I think that that's probably one of our best defenses right now, right? Until we have a vaccine or until we have therapeutics. And look, I mean, the we knew so little about this particular coronavirus in the beginning, and all we had to compare it to was flu and SARS. And it was really only until the last couple of weeks where we said, aha, wow, this asymptomatic transmission is really driving this. I always bring back Dr. Fauci's very early and committed assertions that epidemics are not driven by asymptomatic transmission. And until COVID-19, that was largely true. So, I think masks are a huge thing. And remember, they're not protecting you. They are protecting others. It's a very small behavioral change and really no sacrifice to do that for each other.
Yeah, it is not a difficult thing. You start getting used to it after a while. At first, it seems strange, but it seems like a small thing to do if we can keep each other safer by doing it. Dr. Azar, thanks so much for being with us. We always love seeing you. Hope to see you again soon.
Thanks.
When will we start seeing trailers for new movies again? Hollywood halted production during the pandemic, putting hundreds of thousands of people out of work. But California Governor Gavin Newsom is working on a plan to bring it back. NBC News correspondent Joe Fryer joins me now. And Joe, this is exciting on so many levels. What do we know so far about the governor's plan?
Well, Allison, we know Governor Newsom says he plans to unveil these guidelines on Monday, on Memorial Day. So we'll get a lot more information then. But he already spoke out a little bit about this during a teleconference yesterday and says that he thinks a good chunk of California, perhaps 53 out of 58 counties, are going to be able to move into having some sort of production in the near future. The problem is that does not include L.A. County right now. L.A. County, of course, remains California's epicenter with the most cases and the most deaths. So L.A. County is going to be moving slower, perhaps a few weeks behind other counties. That is, of course, where most of the studios are, where Hollywood is. So that could slow things down a little bit. But we know that Hollywood has already been working hard on this. In fact, the Directors Guild created a special committee looking into how to get production going again. That committee, in fact, headed by Steven Soderbergh, who just happens to be the guy, coincidentally, who directed Contagion. Allison?
Yeah. Oh, Joe, I got to ask you, what are you hearing from production companies in LA? I mean, some film and TV productions are just huge. When we get to the stage that they're able to start up again, how is it going to be possible to socially distance on large and crowded sets?
It might not be possible, at least at first. There are some serious questions they have to answer. Can they do large scenes with lots of extras? Probably not. How do they handle fight scenes, perhaps, or more intimate moments? We do know Netflix has already resumed production in a few other countries, Iceland, Sweden, and South Korea. So that's giving them a good hint of what's to come and changes that are happening. In Iceland, for example, all cast and crew can be tested for COVID-19 beforehand, so they're all able to get tested. But in places where that's not possible, they're going to be doing temperature checks. They're going to be reducing the number of people who could be on set at any time. You're not going to see buffets or craft services. You're going to see boxed meals. You might only see one makeup artist who's using single-use disposable applicators. There are lots of changes on top of all the cleaning that's going to be taking place. During that teleconference Governor Newsom had yesterday, he actually had some big Hollywood names on, including the chief content officer for Netflix and filmmaker Ava DuVernay. Take a listen to what they had to say about this.
The one thing that is constant throughout the world is that production environments are very controlled environments. There are security budgets in place to make sure people don't come and go on the set who you don't know who they are and where they've been.
What we're trying to think about is pods, moving people off. You know, when you're done, you leave. You may be down for a couple hours at another location. You would come back.
And one thing, Allison, we certainly know is demand for content is very high right now, especially television or streaming services. Netflix saw a record number of new subscriptions in the first quarter. Allison.
Joe, I'd love to ask you about Tyler Perry. He's releasing his own plan to reopen his production studio in Atlanta by July. What's he saying?
Yeah, so he is going to start production on 2 shows that will be airing on BET in July. Of course, that is in Atlanta. He has unveiled a 30-page document laying out how he plans to try and keep workers safe. A few key things in that. He says that the cast and crew must be tested for COVID-19. They must self-isolate before even traveling to Georgia to begin production, and they must social distance as much as possible on set, not leaving the so-called quarantine bubble while filming. Perry says he's taking extreme measures to try and mitigate some of the risk. And there's no doubt other studios and companies are going to be looking at what happens there. One worry here in Hollywood is if Georgia gets up and running sooner, or other states or other countries, might some companies and productions take their projects to those other states? That is a worry here in California, and some are telling the governor that he might really need to try and think of some incentives to try and make sure that some of the productions actually stay in Hollywood. Allison?
Yeah, big concern there. Joe Fryer, thanks so much for giving us the Hollywood update. Appreciate it.
Sure.
Many Americans tired of feeling trapped indoors or taking their homes on the road. An Ohio State Park is prepping for an unprecedented demand at its RV and camping sites this holiday weekend. And one RV sharing service says it's seeing a 650% increase in rental bookings since April. NBC News correspondent Cal Perry is at the Stony Ridge Campground in Perrysburg, Ohio, another stop on his road to recovery RV trip across America.
And that's right. Campgrounds, RV parks opening today across the state of Ohio. This RV park, they're getting ready for an influx of visitors. Now, the state of Ohio has put out a number of regulations of things that need to change because of the COVID. Most of them are based around social distancing and cleaning the bathrooms very frequently, though this RV park is going to keep its bathrooms closed because of COVID. They just don't want people closely in an enclosed space like that. Now, for the people who own these parks, today couldn't have come fast enough. I got in Saturday night from London on a plane that had 19 people on it. Empty, weird. Slept in his driveway Saturday night. Thank you for that, by the way.
Yeah, man, absolutely.
This is just a very functional way to tell the story. It allows us to social distance. And we aren't the only ones thinking about social distancing in travel. A new survey by the nation's largest campground network shows demand for camping is up already from before the pandemic.
Little town in Ohio.
Jake BOTKE, who runs Ohio's Stony Ridge Campground, expects the site to be full this weekend.
Memorial Day weekend is like the kickoff to our summer camping season. Even though all these restrictions and weird times we're living in, I'm happy to see some campers coming.
Now, the numbers of people who are choosing to RV this summer increasing rapidly. There was a survey done by KOA, Campgrounds of America, that found leisure travelers, 16% of them preferred this, RV and camping, as their choice of activities. One of the places that works with campers to rent them out, one of the biggest suppliers in the country, said they've had a 650% increase in just a month. Anecdotally, we've had difficulty finding places to stay in the next couple of days, so you can expect this could be the summer of RVing across America. Allison?
Hey, NBC News fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here, and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.